The Fraser Valley saw one of the fastest increase in home prices seen in history. During the COVID era, prices literally doubled within a couple of years. Abbotsford, for example, saw home prices range from 500K in 2020, skyrocketing up to $1 million by 2022. The demand for more space and bigger yards at lower prices drove city dwellers towards greener pastures in huge numbers. But since 2022, things have changed and prices are down at least 25% in some areas and obviously more in others. And the calls to come back to work in the downtown area, well, those are increasing, and it's forcing some homeowners to sell at a loss, leave the valley, and possibly forever. So in this episode, we are talking with Conor Kelly, a real estate advisor who specializes in the Fraser Valley, to hear what is really going on in that market. Conor, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Dan, Ryan, I appreciate it, man. I'm looking forward to this.
Great. So are we. Do you want to maybe give everyone a bit of a background as to your foray into real estate, the areas you serve, and start talking about what it was like when you dove straight into one of the craziest markets seen in our history?
Yeah, so I actually got licensed in August of 2021. So that would have been like the very back end of that run up, right? So when I got licensed, it was like a lot of people would assume that, it was easy to be a realtor in that time frame. But as a realtor, you're focused on sales, right? There was a lot of sales happening, but the problem is like you couldn't get the inventory was low and things were selling so fast. It's very tough to actually get a buyer to buy something, right? You would show up to an open house, there's 80 pairs of shoes at the door, and you'd have to somehow convince your client to write $400,000 over the asking price with no subjects, which is like, a real estate transaction for a brand new realtor is already an unnerving experience. And then you pile all that on top. And then, of course, the buyers would just be like, no, I'm not doing that. So they would have to write 4 or 5 offers first before they realize, like, okay, like he's not lying. Like, I'm actually going to have to do that if I want to buy the house, right? So at that time period, I really only did like a couple transactions on the market. And I had made some relationships with some developers, and I was able to get clients into pre-sales. And there was a lot of talk about speculation, but I found a lot of my transactions at that time were people who had lost on like 6, 7, 8, 9 offers on resale. And they're like, dude, we just want to buy something. We can't, but like prices have gone up $50,000 since we started looking. And sure, if you buy pre-sale, maybe I pay 5% over market value for this, but at least I have it. And I know in 3 weeks, I'm going to end up paying that on the resale market anyways. Right. So I did a lot of pre-sale transactions in like the back end of 2021 into early 2022. Some of those buyers are down. Some of them I was actually able to assign them out of those contracts and people actually made money. But yeah, some of those people are obviously down on their purchases, just like, pretty much anybody who would have bought during that time frame. But yeah, it was, there was more transactions, but it was still pretty hard if you're a realtor because, in a crash, there's way too much inventory and no buyers. Well, it was just like the inverse of that. There's like no inventory and way too many buyers, right? So
that was a crazy time. I mean, I remember we got in 2017. So we had a little bit of time before that gnarliness took off, but once it did, it exploded. I remember. Much like you're talking about, like, the conditioning that people would have to go through to try and buy a house here and then having their expectations just, destroyed and then getting, and people are like, this house went for $200,000 more than my offer. It seems crazy, but that was the world that we were in. And certainly when you're throwing free money around, you fuel that fire faster than you could possibly imagine. I mean, we had house prices going up at 1.5 to 1.8% a month, right? Here we are looking at staring down 3.3%, decline in prices over a year. And so you start looking at these two markets and you're like, it's not healthy. It's not sustainable. It shouldn't be like this. Right. But, that was sort of a good run up to sort of my question here, because if you accelerate from where you started and then you get to sort of that post 2022 sort of time frame when interest rates spiked to 5%, we saw them grow by 1,600% in a very, very, very short period of time, the fastest rise in history. and it's just slammed the brakes on everything, including our entire economy. Um, it's now the Canadian real estate market's more or less on hold, and prices are now dropping. And the Fraser Valley, it was no secret, took this on the chin. And so I'd love to hear from you, with prices dropping, honestly, more than the rest of the country. Can you walk us through what that shift has been like, not just for you as an agent, but maybe also for people that you're helping in this marketplace?
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess you want to start from kind of like the 2022 where things changed.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I first noticed it when I had a townhome listing coming up and the evaluation was about 1.2 mil at that time. And the week before we went live, an agent on my team had said that he had done offer dates on a townhome in the same area, very similar product, and got he said he had no offers. He had no offers on it. And that was the first time I had ever heard somebody not having like 10 offers on their townhome, right? And basically what happened was like after the second week of February, townhomes in like Willoughby Heights dropped like $150,000 from like the second week of February to the end of February, right? So if you look at the HPI, there's a number that's registered there, but prices actually went quite a bit higher than that number. It's just they came back down in the back half of February. So it closed at a much lower number, right? But prices came down as much as 40% because they went up so much. Like I remember checking the MLS for townhomes in Abbotsford, and there was like 11 townhomes in all of Abbotsford. So I went through and I touch based all the realtors like, hey, still available, still available. And after I had messaged everybody, there was like one townhome for sale in all of Abbotsford. There was like literally one, right? So there's just nothing to buy. But yeah, I mean, going into 2022, like till May, I'd say the market was still pretty good. And then in summer, just completely died, right? Because we had that 1% interest rate hike that scared the crap out of everybody, obviously. And prices, I would say, got pretty oversold into the back end of 2022, right? Like you could get a townhome in Langley under 750 into the back end of 2022. And now all those townhomes are back in the mid eights. They went back up to like 900,000 at one point, right? Because as we got into 2023, I think the bond market went back down. I think yields went to like 5.5 and they came down into the low fours for spring of 2023 or something like that. And we still had really low inventory. So a lot of the product that had gone down so much in 2022 rallied into spring, and it rallied pretty quick. Like it happened in like a month or 2 months. Detached homes and townhomes rallied over $100,000, right? But if you're a buyer in the back end of 2022, it was really tough because prices came down so fast that sellers hadn't acclimatized themselves to that market value, right? So like the market value for a home would be like, let's just say $1,050,000. Well, everybody was still priced at like 1.3, 1.25, 1.4. So if you wanted to buy a house at that time, you had to like, it felt like, even though that was the market value, it felt like you were submitting a highly disrespectful offer, right? Like if you wanted to buy a home, you had to negotiate $300,000 off of that asking price. And it just felt like you were being disrespectful, even though that's where the market value was, right? So it was really tough to get a seller to come down and adjust to where the market was. You'd have 50 homes all priced 200 grand over what they should be. And then you would have one sale that was willing to sell at the actual market price. Right. So, and now today I would say the spread is a lot closer, right? Like, things are priced for the market, but there's just not a lot of buyers out there. There's not as much overpriced inventory as there was like in the back end of 2022 and even into 2023 and even the front end of 2024, I would say.
Very interesting. Yeah, we see that, of course, here in Vancouver as well, where sellers still want that 2022 price sometimes, but that's only 5, 6, 7%, above market. Couldn't imagine having to have the realization that your property's gone down 25 or even 40%, like you mentioned. That's tough. So I guess give us a bit of a snapshot of where we are today. And what I mean by that is, we obviously talk mostly about Greater Vancouver and the Lower Mainland, and viewers here are very up to date on what the landscape is here. But Is it kind of the same out in the valley? Are you experiencing record high inventory, record low sales like we just saw here in May? Like what's sort of the up to the minute state of the union?
Oh yeah, I mean, condo inventory is basically at record highs. Townhome is not at all-time highs, but it's getting close to all-time highs. And then detached is kind of, I don't know, to me, it looks like it's kind of around historical norms, but I think that's just because every year we tear them down and we replace them with condos and townhomes. So every year there's actually an overall lesser supply of detached homes. But yeah, I mean, from what I see is like a strategy that I'm seeing working right now is like people are actually pricing it slightly below market value, like maybe 1% below market value. And those will still sell in a week if it's a good product, right? If you're pricing for, like market value plus a little bit of room for negotiation, most things are taking like 30 days to sell, depending on what it is, right? Maybe 3 weeks to sell, depending on what it is. But it's slow. I know John Flynn will do like an update of like all of Canada, and he'll put all the like sales to new listings ratios in there. And Fraser Valley is consistently being like the second worst in Canada, right? So like we're like 30% below last year's sales. Last year was already a really bad year, and then inventory is at record highs. I think we might even be, as of today, above 10,000 listings in the Fraser Valley, which we haven't seen since 2009. So, yeah.
For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. If you believe in physics. If you believe in physics, anyways. And it certainly felt like, that story you just told us, it felt like just the opposite reaction to what had happened on the front side of it. Very interesting to hear. And, it doesn't surprise me. I think, when you consider, I wonder, to what degree, because we find people here in Vancouver are often leaving because it's unaffordable. And so when you talk about, single family homes being torn down to create more either condos or townhomes, the people that are probably buying those homes, I wonder if many of them are coming from places like Vancouver where they otherwise couldn't afford a home. And then that sort of trickle down effect is taking place throughout the markets. And I think the reason I'm kind of getting into demographics is because BC just saw its first contraction in the actual overall population size outside of COVID. And, it seems the most pronounced in the most expensive areas where people just, or the most unaffordable areas of the province. Are you seeing people leave the valley as well for places like either cheaper pastures within the province, or are you seeing them move to Alberta? Because that, where we often see that as well. I'd love to hear what you're seeing from a migration sort of perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I deal with a lot of buyers that are coming from Vancouver for sure. A lot of them will end up in like Surrey Central or Willoughby Heights is like a really, hot area that a lot of people from Vancouver will move to. I haven't talked to a lot of people recently that have moved, that are talking about moving to Alberta. Like I was having a lot of those conversations in 2023 and 2022, but I wouldn't say I'm having a lot of those conversations now. The level of traffic here definitely hasn't changed. But I am talking to a lot of people that are actually leaving Canada entirely, right? Like they're going to Dubai. I know somebody went to Colombia, Thailand. Where else? Miami. I know one person.
What's your, with those people that are leaving Canada entirely, what seems to be the motivation?
I think they're just sick of the government, to be honest with you. I don't think they see a light at the end of the tunnel with kind of what's happening here with like policy, and it's very hard to make money here. We get taxed a lot. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, like, even from a realtor standpoint, like I did the numbers. If I go sell real estate in say Arizona, I could sell 1/3 the amount of real estate to make the same amount of money, which is crazy.
Yeah. You wonder why all the best hockey players play in Florida.
Well, exactly. Right. This is why we keep losing Stanley Cups, man.
Well, I mean, you can get, it's incredible because you go around the rest of the world and affordability is ever present here in Vancouver. Or the greater Vancouver regional district anyways. It's just, it's expensive. It's like you leave your house to do one thing and it's $150. Like
dude,
that.
I've been saying exactly that for the last, every time I leave the house, it's $150. I don't know how, but it's always $150.
It's not good.
I was curious to hear a little bit more about the your foray into the pre-sale world. Super smart, helping clients who are getting outbid consistently move into an option where they don't have to fight for it. And I know Abbotsford has been growing a lot. It's actually right now has some of the highest amount of pre-sale projects that are actually under construction, and more in the pipeline, which is of course kind of the complete opposite of what we talk about mostly in the Toronto area, which has collapsed like 95%. Vancouver's numbers are pretty comparable. So yeah, can you tell us more, like what is happening in the pre-sale world in the Valley? Is it still strong, or does it kind of emulate what's happening in other regions?
It's not dead, but it's extremely soft, right? Like it's very hard to hit absorption rates to actually get financing and launch a project. And there's quite a few projects out there right now. There wasn't at, towards, last year. I'd say we probably even have more active projects this year than last year. I don't have the data to back that up, but that's what it feels like. But it's very slow. A lot of the product, in my opinion, is overpriced at the moment, but there are some decent deals out there, right? Like, I have one project in mind that, you can probably get a one bed and den that's about $40,000 less than anything that's on the MLS. If you're a first time home buyer, you're not paying GST. It's a pretty good deal, right? But that's very few and far between, right? Like I know that project, that developer probably built 10, 11 buildings in there. And this last building that he's building is probably straight profit. So he can offer those prices, right? He just wants to offload it and move on to the next thing, right? But, most of the projects, the developers just don't have the margins for that. Like I just saw a chart, I think Daniel Foch posted it, where it's like developers that have margins in their projects and then developers that don't. And there's like 10 green dots above the neutral line. And then it's just like a bloodbath of red dots below it. Right. So they can't offer the prices that are competitive with the resale market right now, because they would just be losing too much money. Right. So that's why product is sitting and building up and et cetera, et cetera.
Probably continue to see that lack of building permits well into the future, until I really believe until we start to see an improvement in the overall economy as well. I don't know if it's just going to be the like you mentioned, taxation. Connor, I think this country is due for reform in that respect. If you really want to bring back investment into the country from all around the world, people have to know that they can keep the money they're making. Or that it's at least getting spent in a way that benefits what it is they're invested in. And speaking a little bit more to the project side, has there been any adoption of Bill 44 in the Valley, the multiplex initiative that was spearheaded by the province here? We're seeing here in Vancouver, at least to some degree, we get developers who are still looking for homes, prime lots within Vancouver, east and west, to transform them into, multi-unit developments. Are you seeing that a lot as well?
I don't do a lot in development, but I know there are people talking about doing it in Surrey specifically. I don't know anybody who's actually started that process and got the ball rolling, but I know there's people talking about it. I know there's people interested in doing it, but I just haven't personally seen it. So it's hard for me to comment on it.
Well, then let me rephrase that then. If you're looking in what you know about the Fraser Valley, do you think that the initiative is as warranted as it is in the Valley as it is, say, in a place like Vancouver, where, people struggle to stay inside of a particular neighborhood because of the cost of that neighborhood? So if they can get into a duplex or or a triplex, then they can stay in the neighborhood and not pay that single family home price. But are there just different options in the Fraser Valley that maybe don't necessitate such a push for that?
You're saying, does the dynamic of the market warrant the multiplex zoning, basically?
In the same fashion that it would, say, in Vancouver, right? Because, in the Valley, the geographical constraints in the Valley are quite different, right? Mm-hmm. Vancouver is constrained, and typically it's going up, right, with density. But the Valley, outside of maybe urban containment boundaries and agricultural land reserves, there's typically quite a bit more land. And I'm wondering if the need for that is as present in what you're seeing and what you're hearing from buyers who would, say, prefer to have an option like a half duplex or a triplex, but don't see that in their marketplace. Is that because there's just a ton of townhomes they can choose from, or they can make the stretch to a single family?
I don't know. I guess it depends on the price point, right? Like what price are those going to be built at, right? If we can make them cheaper than a 3-bedroom townhome, then probably, yeah, I'd say there's probably a need for that because there's just not a lot of 3-bedroom product, right? Like this is why townhomes are still selling through at a really high clip. Like you have like a 28% sales ratio in Cloverdale. And I think Willoughby is like 26%. So obviously there's despite everything that's happening, there's still a big need for a 3-bedroom home, right? But from like a housing supply perspective, I mean, I think we're finding out that we probably don't need as much supply as we thought we needed, right? Like now immigration has slowed down a lot. There's a lot of rental supply in the pipeline. There's a lot more pre-construction stuff completing. But I think I would agree that, yeah, we probably need more family homes. So I'd say, yeah, we probably need it. But again, I'd have to see like what price point is that going to be at, right? Like if they build a 1,200 square foot 3-bedroom home and it still costs $800,000, then it's probably not going to help much, right?
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
As someone obviously who lives there, you have that unique sort of boots on the ground sense of what's going on in the marketplace, you know? And so it's seen the two extremes. It's seen extreme growth in prices and then it's kind of whiplash back. I'm very curious to hear sort of what's the demand right now? Like I just heard townhomes are clearly quite popular. What do you think, like moving forward, what's going to happen in the Fraser Valley? Like, do you see more people from Vancouver just coming in? Is it just going to have natural growth or more people leaving? Like, I don't know, how would you advise someone who's moving to that area and help them understand what to expect and sort of like where they're going to be best positioned for the growth of the Valley?
I would focus on, so 2 years ago, if you asked me that question, like what had worked really, really well, like even Vancouver anywhere was like I would have bought a decent condo in a bad neighborhood, right? Because the cash flow numbers would have been better. Like you would have gotten pretty much the same rent as the good neighborhood and you would have paid a cheaper price. So your cash flow would have been a lot better. And then like a rising tide lifts all boats, right? But today I would focus on end user areas, right? Like your Cloverdale, your Willoughby Heights, South Surrey. And then I would pay a premium for a better product. You know what I mean? Like I would get the nicest 2-bedroom, maybe not overly nice, not luxurious, but like the higher end of that middle bracket housing, right? With like a good layout, maybe has some upgrades with a good exposure, good location, good building, good strata. Overall, like I think like people are going to continue to shift towards more affordable markets. Like that's why you're still seeing Alberta with like 21,000 people moving there in the last quarter or something like that. And I actually think like, dude, I always get chewed up for saying this, but I think like the dynamics of our economy are about to change pretty big and it's going to be less necessary to be in a dense city center, right? Like as the digital economy grows, as AI becomes more of a thing, this whole self-driving car thing that's happening, right? Like it'll probably become less necessary to have to live in a dense city center to make a high income, right? Like you might be able to do that from your laptop in the next, like people are already doing it, but maybe it becomes more common and less necessary to live in like a downtown Vancouver, right? That's my like, harebrained kind of thesis, right? Maybe I'm wrong on that, but I think you're going to see people, and I'm not saying that like, oh, the Fraser Valley is going to appreciate like crazy because of this. I'm just saying, I think if people have the choice between living in a more expensive area and a more affordable area, they're going to continue to choose the more affordable area.
I tend to agree. I was actually saying this to Dan last night, how much I think, our economy is headed to a place where you're going to find people struggling to find $15 an hour jobs, while at the same time, people are utilizing the tools of AI to make a $500,000 business from their basement. And you're going to have this sort of happening simultaneously in the marketplace. And we don't quite know yet what that impact is going to be on real estate and the necessity for it. Certainly I think it speaks to the utility side of a home and making sure that your home has the option for something like, the benefit of working in a basement suite that could generate something like that. So I tend to agree. I do think there will be, we're already seeing this pushback to, the dog crate condo kind of era of, developers just building because there was a lot of speculating taking place. And I know you kind of mentioned end user marketplaces, but maybe let's just quickly touch on the downtown Surrey City Center, where you're seeing, the planning for so many thousands of condos that would be coming. Are you thinking in those areas you're going to see continued softening until such a time where either rates are low enough to pick up the slack, or supply gets pulled back to a point where they slow that down, or a price is just going to continue to kind of crater?
Prices are going down right now. The thing with Surrey Central is like it's gotten really cheap, right? Like it's way cheaper than its surrounding neighborhoods at this point, right? Like you might have like, a newer wood frame condo in like, I don't know, Fleetwood is like high fours, and that same condo in Surrey Central is like under 450 now, like 440, 430, right? So at some point, I feel like that gap just gets too big, and then it's like, well, I don't want to live in Surrey Central, but the numbers just make so much more sense for me to stick it out and then buy in Surrey Central, right? But yeah, I mean, the prices are going down. There's a lot of inventory. I guess the positive or negative thing, depending on how you want to look at it, would be that it's almost impossible to launch new product in Surrey Central at the moment, right? Yeah. It is very, very difficult to hit sales on anything. There's a lot of standing concrete product there, standing wood frame product. So there's probably not going to be a lot of inventory completing in 27, 28, and they just have to eat through the inventory that's currently there. The thing with South Surrey is that Surrey Central is that right now it's not an end user product. It's not an end user area, but I think it will be, like in the next decade. What it's really missing is amenities, because it's just, there's so many residential towers there. And then there's like one brewery and like an old mall from the 70s that they've like kind of done some updates to, right? They need like a cactus club and like trendy cafes and stuff that Vancouver has, and like stuff for people to do so they can leave their house and enjoy like a night out with their friends and stuff like that. And I think once that stuff starts coming there, people will actually want to live in that area, right?
That's a good point. I think, a lot of those developments that we are seeing come to the market, they're master planned communities. So you will see some of those amenities, I think, pop up, as the commercial elements are built as well. So Conor, for those thinking about moving to the Fraser Valley, what are the most important facts they need to know about making that decision today? Like what would you tell somebody who's coming to the Fraser Valley with with the intention of buying real estate? What are the top three things that you would prepare them with?
I guess it depends on what's important to them. Everybody's different, right? Like if somebody was buying a place, but they intended to rent it out later on, typically speaking, the cash flow numbers get better the further east you go, right? The further east you go into the valley, the cheaper it gets, but the rent doesn't change very much from like a Surrey to Chilliwack, right? So your cash flow is typically better in like a Chilliwack than it would be in a Surrey, right? The next thing I tell them is like, if you have to say commute to Vancouver, right, you're probably going to want to be in like a Willoughby Heights, because that's end user product that's right along the highway, right? So you're, 2-3 minutes away from the highway. It's low crime. It's nice. It's aesthetically pleasing. There's tons of inventory to choose from. And I would just focus, I think it depends what you're buying, but like the main thing, especially when you're buying strata property, is the floor plan, right? Like what is the functionality of that floor plan, right? Because people will often look at like square footage, right? So like you can go buy a 1990s condo that has 900 square feet, but typically in a lot of those condos, you'll have like, the kitchen is like tucked away in the corner and super dark. And then like the foyer is like 200 square feet for some reason. And then the master bedroom will be like 200 square feet. So, if you buy like something that's maybe 10 years old, but every space of that floor plan is functional, it's only 850 square feet, I'd probably buy that over the 1990s, right? But again, it just depends on the buyer, what's important to them. But like as a very like broadly speaking thing, just end user product, right? South Surrey, Cloverdale. You have your Willoughby Heights. If you're in Abbotsford, if you're buying a detached, I like East Abbotsford personally. Condos, there isn't a lot of like end user areas for condos in Abbotsford, but there is like more end user buildings, right? So you want to focus on like the end user building, right? I guess there's just not a lot of condo product in Abbotsford, right? But yeah, I guess it just depends on what's important to the buyer, you know?
Yep, that makes perfect sense. We appreciate it. It's a really fascinating marketplace to watch. You know, we kind of are from the outside looking in, so it's good to get the inside scoop on what's happening there. And for anybody out there who is considering moving to the Valley and they want to learn more, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, I mean, you could call my phone. You could follow my YouTube. I'm on TikTok, Instagram. I'm just about everywhere. But you could email me, right? Go check out my contact info on the YouTube channel. And yeah, I'm happy to chat with anybody. So
Perfect. Well, we will, of course, add all of your contact details in the show notes here so they can reach out and talk to you about what it's like living in the Valley. Conor, thanks so much for joining us today. We really appreciate this, and we'll send some business your way. And let's do this again. We'd love to get a refresh on how this market evolves over the coming months and years.
Likewise, I appreciate it, boys. Thank you.
Will do. Okay, thanks everyone for tuning in as always, and have a great week.